These are the definitions that you will need to know for the upcoming vocab quiz. We're going to break this down and make this quick, dirty, and hopefully it makes a little bit more sense once you listen to it. Colonization. It is basically a nation controlling a foreign country or a foreign land, and the foreign land is considered the colony, and the motherland is really the European country that's colonizing. So for example, let's say it was Spain, and they were colonizing a country in South America. Spain would be that European country that would go and control the colony in South America. They would take over the natural resources, and they would make the native people be the labor and work in the mines or the plantations, and they would take the wealth from the South American country and make Spain wealthy. And that's kind of how colonization works. In essence, it kind of feels like stealing. It shows a ship sailing in to colonize a foreign land. Fascism or Nazism. It's where fascists, basically a philosophy that supports a strong central government, and it's controlled by a strong military and led by a powerful dictator. Well, that kind of sounds like communism so far, but there are some distinct differences, and here's the biggie. It's really a country that also has an extreme form of patriotism. It's nationalism to the nth. So they have this extreme form of nationalism or patriotism to the point where fascists become a racist belief, and that some don't look or represent the country, and that's obviously what led to the Holocaust. And then you see the swastika symbol, and that is the Nazi symbol. The Great Depression. It started in 1929 in the United States with the stock market crash. It was an economic slump that lasted into the 1930s and really ended with World War II. Obviously, it caused food shortages. People were unemployed. They lost everything. And this was a hardship really felt around the world. And you see depression is kind of overtaking everything. The Great Depression sure did. And sometimes it's called the worldwide depression, which is the Great Depression. Okay, let's talk about communism and kind of compare that to Nazism or fascism. So it's where you have a strong central government, and it's usually one party, but oftentimes it's also a dictator with a strong military. So far it sounds awfully similar to fascism. But here's the thing. Communism believes that the government should own all the industries, the government should own all the land, the government should own all the businesses. And then in theory, and I do stress in theory, it is distributed equally to a classless society. So they basically believe everybody's equal and the individual shares in the ownership of those things. However, it's the government that owns them, but then they were supposedly redistributes that equally among citizens. That's kind of the idea behind communism. When we get into it, we'll talk about and discuss some of the issues and problems with communism. And you see here, communism and Nazism are really, although they seem similar, they're really quite opposite, because fascism believes in a class system. There are some that represent the country much better, and there is a class system. In communism, there really is not. Okay, Age of Exploration. Hopefully this one's a little bit easier. When Europeans went and discovered new lands, and they were doing it really for wealth, and their motivation was God, glory, and gold. And that shows the trade routes and all the exploration that they did around the globe. The Berlin Wall is an actual wall. It was created by the Soviet Union around West Berlin, and it really encircled West Berlin. It didn't separate them. It did, but it encircled and separated the east from the west. And when we get into Germany, you're going to see where Berlin was located and why they had to encircle the wall around the west side of Berlin. But it is an actual wall. And you can see here the wall, the barbed wire. There was a no man's land where you did not get near the wall. It was definitely a secured area. The Marshall Plan. This is a recovery plan where the United States said, these are our friends, these are our allies after World War II, and Europe was in ruins. I mean, cities, bridges, roads, everything needed to be rebuilt. It's almost like a bomb was dropped, and they were bombs, but the magnitude of rebuilding that needed to occur and building up the economy was really, quite frankly, overwhelming. So we came up with the plan, and the Secretary of State, Marshall, came up with the idea of giving them aid and money. And that helped our allies and rebuild their countries after World War II. Okay, so this was after World War II because we learned a great lesson. We do not want a repeat of World War I. And that gives you the European Recovery Program. Militarism is basically building up your military. Why? It wasn't just to defend your own country, but you've got these great giant empires, and you see up here at this map all around the world that you needed a big military to defend. And so there was a big recruitment, a big building up of the military to defend not only your country, but all the colonies that were up for grab. The Iron Curtain. This is really a division, a political barrier. It's not an actual wall. It's more of a political barrier. It's separated. There was this idea of people in the East are communist and people in the West are democratic. And you see this big division. It obviously isn't a wall, no way to build a wall this extensive, but it basically separated the East communist from the West that were democratic. The empire means it's a country that controls other countries. So you have an empire that, like the UK was the greatest empire in the world at one time. They had land almost in every time zone, so the sun would never set on them. And you see a map here where that's an empire controlling other colonies. Nationalism. That's a pride in one's country, and that's a good thing. Nationalism can be good, but it also can be bad if it's taken to a great extent. For example, food. We need food to eat. We need food to live. But too much food can make us overweight or obese. Well, too much nationalism can result, and that was kind of the idea behind fascism. You get too much and you are willing to do almost anything, despite common sense, to defend your country. And that's kind of the idea of nationalism. An alliance. Oftentimes the alliances were military in nature, but an alliance can be an agreement to defend and help another country. But oftentimes it was more the defense, so it's usually a military alliance. Okay, Warsaw Pact. It's basically established by all the communist countries in the East. So you've got the Soviet Union and all of the East Bloc countries over here made up the Warsaw Pact. And again, you see Germany, but it's not all of Germany, it's only East Germany. And then you see the picture. NATO. It's an alliance that was democratic, and it included the Western Bloc countries, or the Western countries of Europe, Canada, and the United States, and they represented democracy. So one represented the government owning everything, where here it's the people have a lot of freedoms and free will, whereas here the government kind of controls. So that's kind of the idea between those two philosophies. And really the Cold War was a big standoff between these two philosophies. NATO was the alliance created, and it was democratic, and the Warsaw Pact was communist, and it was those Eastern Bloc countries. And this was a conflict and a standoff between how the economy should run and really how the people should set up their governments between these two superpowers. And the Cold War was between the United States and the Soviet Union. And that's what the picture shows, the Soviet Union and the United States. And propaganda, I believe is our last term, is the material and mass communication, radio, TV, news, and it's designed to spread certain beliefs. So I don't want to say it's brainwashing, but it's usually used by a government, and it's continual in every form. You get flyers, you see posters, you see billboards, you get radio ads telling you something about what the government wants you to believe, and pretty soon you start to believe it. And that's how propaganda is used.